All right, welcome to WSQ 28. And today we are going to continue on in our discussions of the lesser kingdoms. So those organisms that, maybe aren't as popular, as renowned or known as animals and plants. And what we're going to deal with today are with a group of organisms known as protists. And what we want to really, our goal or objective is to find out what are their characteristics. It's the difference between those that are animal-like and those that are plant-like and those that are fungus-like. And we're going to talk about one specific group known as algae. And really, they're unique in that they are a multicellular protist. And we're talking about how they're organized and how they function and how they're structured. So we have to start, as we always do, by actually defining what we mean here. When we say a protist, what exactly are we talking about? All protists fit under a couple things. One, they're all eukaryotes. Okay, eukaryotes, remember, are organisms that do have a nucleus. So prokaryotes, like bacteria, are non-nucleic. They have no nucleus. Protists and other eukaryotes, meaning animals and plants and fungi, do have a nucleus. They also live in moist environments. They have to be near water, and they can't be classified as these other groups, so they get their own classification as protists. They're also a really diverse group. As you can see from these images, they vary widely in what they look like and how they function and act. So we're going to jump in and start talking about them. And how we're going to divide these up today is we're going to look at really three large groupings. We're going to look at the animal-like protists. We're going to then look at the plant-like protists, and then we'll finish up with the fungus-like protists. So the animal-like protists we refer to as protozoans. Okay, protozoans are unicellular, so single-celled. They are heterotrophic, which means they obtain their own food. They don't make their own food. They have to eat it. And they move from place to place to obtain food. So they are actually, if you think about them, okay, they're single-celled. There's one. Okay, they're heterotrophs. They eat. Okay, and they move from place to place to obtain. So they're mobile. Okay, that's what we're dealing with when we talk about animal-like protozoans. And there's four types of protozoans that we can discuss in greater detail. And so we're going to look at each of those four types of protozoans. The first type of protozoans that we're going to talk about are protozoans with pseudopods. Okay, and this word right here is an important word. Amoebas are an example of animal-like protists that have pseudopods. What a pseudopod is the best way to think about it. It's a bulge, okay, and it's temporary. So it's a temporary bulge made by the organism by which they can actually kind of push out their cellular wall, and they can use that pseudopod to move, and they can use that pseudopod to eat. And so you can see here in this example, even of this amoeba, here's a little grain of food that's about to get eaten. And what they'll do is they'll push out and form these cavities that they can use to envelop. They'll actually close over that, and then this food particle will get dissolved through the cell wall and get captured by the amoeba and eaten. Okay, they also can move their bulge of the pseudopod to actually create motion, remember, through water. So pseudopods are really, really important. The word itself actually means false foot. Okay, so it's not a real foot, right? But they use it for movement. Amoebas fit into this group of what are called sarcodines. They live in water or soil, but they're always usually close to water. And they feed on bacteria and other small protists. Okay, so these protozoans that fit into these groups have what we'd call pseudopods, which allow them to move and to eat. Okay. Now, one thing about these pseudopods, if you look at the amoeba closely, we can see a few things. Right? Look at some of the different. So here's the pseudopod, right, to move and to feed. And they just have the cytoplasm moving out. You can see that they do have a cell membrane all the way around the outside of the organism. Within, they have these things called food vacuoles, which allow them to actually break down the food inside of that vacuole, and then it's able to be absorbed for energy. They have a contractile vacuole, which collects excess of water. So you think of this kind of like plants, and can expel that excess water from the cell. They have cytoplasm, and notice, because they're eukaryotic, they also have a nucleus that controls their cell functions and their reproduction and things like that. Second type of protozoan, we have our protozoans with cilia. Okay, protozoans with cilia. An example of this type of protozoan are Paramecia. Paramecia are ciliates, okay, that live mostly in fresh water. And just like amoebas, Paramecia feed on bacteria and smaller protists. Now the key here is the first one is protozoans with pseudopods. So they use the pseudopods for movement. Of course, protozoans with cilia use the cilia for movement. So the cilia are these little tiny hairs all the way around the cell, the organism, and these beat. And this allows them to actually move slowly in a direction. They're almost like oars on a big boat that are able to wade them through the water. Notice they're a little bit more complex in some of the structures. They do have contractile vacuoles. They do have a nucleus. Excuse me. And cytoplasm. They do have food vacuoles. They have an oral groove, which is just an indentation inside of the cilia, which allows food and water to be moved towards this oral groove where it can be absorbed into the body. And they have an anal pore, which is a place where waste can be removed from the organism. So we have protozoans with pseudopods, protozoans with cilia. Let's ask, so how are animal-like protists different from bacteria? Okay, remember, bacteria have cell walls, but they don't have a nucleus or a contractile vacuole or a food vacuole. Protozoas, animal-like protozoas, all have those. They have nucleus, they have contractile vacuoles, and they have a food vacuole. And what characteristics make an amoeba suited to life in either soil or water? Well, one of the best things about them is they can change their shape because they're so flexible. They can change their shape and flow through different types of substances and makes them very agile. And what characteristics make the paramecium suited to living only in water? Well, of course, we know that's the contractile vacuoles and the cilia. Okay, plus they have a rigid shape, so they can't move very well between different fluids. Now, the third group of protozoas and the fourth group we're going to talk about, the third one are protozoans with flagella. Okay, these are known as flagellates. These live inside bodies of other organisms, okay? And they have a little flagella right here that looks like a little whip that allows them to move. They can use it almost like a rudder, okay? And they can also, like a propeller that's, that spins in a boat motor, and they can whip it back and forth, and that allows them to actually move throughout an organism and through their bloodstream. The fourth one are protozoans that are parasites, and these are protists that live inside of a host and feed on the cells and body fluids of their hosts. This example right over here is actually an example of malaria. Malaria, you may not know this, malaria is spread by mosquitoes, and malaria is a protist. Malaria is actually a protozoan organism that gets carried in the blood of the mosquitoes and gets passed on from organism to organism. So the mosquito is the means by which the protist can move to new hosts and can spread the disease. And malaria, of course, is a very dangerous disease that can cause all kinds of problems. So those are animal-like protists. Next, we have what are called plant-like protists. Okay, and these fit under the group known as, we call these algae. So if animal-like are known as protozoa, plant-like are known as algae. Algae are autotrophs, so that's why we think of them as plant-like. Autotroph meaning that they make their own food, right? As opposed to heterotrophic protists like protozoan. They vary greatly in their cell organization, their structure and function. Some are unicellular, others are multicellular, and they really break down into a few major groups. Okay, there's I think about 6 of them, but the first one we have are called diatoms. Diatoms are unicellular protists that have these like glass-like cell walls. They almost look like stained glass if you look at them under pond water. They have dinoflagellates, which are unicellular organisms as well, and these actually have a pretty amazing ability. Dinoflagellates actually have the ability to produce different coloring and lighting in the ocean. They have these different pigments, and they can actually, you can see them. A lot of them will glow in the dark, and so you can see this if you've ever been out on the ocean late at night. Dinoflagellates can actually light up the ocean. We have euglenoids or euglenoids. Euglenoids are green unicellular algae that are found in fresh water, like this guy right here. Okay, they typically, euglenoids can be heterotrophic, which means they can also feed on organisms if necessary. And you can see, even from this image for this euglenoid, you can see here's the nucleus right here, and we also have a contractile vacuole right here that's necessary. And this particular example right here is a euglena. Euglena also have these little things right here known as eye spots, which they're not eyes, but they allow them to sense differences in light, and so they know when they're near the surface of the water and they can go deeper. Notice they do have a flagella, which allows them to move within the water as well. You also have red algae. Red algae are a multicellular seaweed that we can grow more than 260 meters below the ocean's surface. So that makes them pretty common, and they're red pigmented, which allows them, because they're red color, I don't know if you ever noticed, deeper sea organisms typically have colors like red, because the red allows them to absorb more light in the deeper ocean, because that's actually the last color of light that can be seen. And people actually use red algae. We use red algae for different things in products. We use them in hair conditioners, and we use them in ice cream, things like that. And a lot of people actually eat red algae as a nutritious food as well. You have green algae. Green algae is mostly unicellular and typically live in fresh and saltwater environments. Why they're called green algae, of course, typically is because they have green pigmentation. And you can also find green algae, though, on land. So they're not always in water environments. You can find them on land where they may grow on bark and things like that, if you've seen green algae like that. And green algae is kind of one of those strange ones where some people actually, classify them as plants and not as protists. So it is kind of interesting. There's debate about that. And the last group are brown algae. These are multicellular seaweeds like kelp. Okay, and they have tissues and organs that resemble the structures we see in plants. Here's an example of a kelp right here. You'll notice they have a holdfast, which kind of looks like a roots. They have a stalk, which would see similar to the vine or the branches, and they also have blades, which look like leaves. But brown algae have these little bladders as well. And the cool thing about brown algae is the bladders, they're used to fill up with air, which allows them to float. And so if you've ever been to Monterey, they have kelp forests there in Monterey. These kelp can grow like up to 100 meters in length. They're massive, and they're home to all kinds of different varieties of animals and fish under the sea. So brown algae are definitely the most complex of all the different protists and algae, and they look almost plant-like in the way that they're designed, but they would also fit into the role of protists. A couple questions. How many cells does a euglena have? As we learned, euglena are single-celled. They would belong to the euglenoids. How are algae similar to plants? Well, think about it. They're autotrophs. They perform photosynthesis. They also have organs like the brown algae that can resemble plant structures as well. And what role do algae-like plants play in the environment? Well, since they do photosynthesis, that means they make oxygen, and they serve as a food source as well for other organisms and even for humans. The last group we're going to talk about quickly is the fungus-like protists. These are heterotrophs that have cell walls, and they use spores to reproduce. And that's interesting because we have to remember these are fungus-like, and these are some words we're going to see in fungus. Spores is one of them. Okay, and fungus are also heterotrophs. This includes slime molds and watery molds and downy mildews. Okay, this is a slime mold right here. And basically the fungus-like protists, because they are heterotrophic and because they use spores to reproduce, tend to be pretty hardy. Can be very dangerous to organisms, and you'll find plants and different animals that can actually be harmed by them. So that is protists in a nutshell. WSQ 28's done. Please make sure you go on Haiku, answer your questions, write out that summary, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.